name is Earl King. Well, I brought in a Second World War motorbike helmet, accompanying goggles, a Glengarry, and then I brought in the Second World War type helmet as well that we used up until the early 60s.
Donning their distinctive Glengarry bonnets to represent their Scottish heritage, the North Nova Scotia Highlanders have brought courage and perseverance to Canadian war efforts since their formation in Amherst in 1936, though their roots can be traced back well into the 19th century. At the time of the Second World War, the North Novies, as they were called, included several regiments from Nova Scotia. In 1941, 1,000 of their infantry regiment had deployed to England, where they trained before making landfall on Juno Beach on June 6, 1944. D-Day, as it is now known, was the largest naval, air and land assault in warfare history. The North Novies' transition from rural life to crossfire on the French shorelines came with great rewards and high costs. Today they are remembered in Amherst's Nova Scotia Highlander Regimental Museum.
Earl, welcome to Militaria, and thank you for bringing in these wonderful artifacts. Could you take a moment and just tell us what these are and where you picked them up?
Thanks, Gary. Well, the first item that I'd seen over the years had been the Glengarrys that my dad wore in the North Nova Scotia Highlanders during the war. And then the goggles were the next thing I located in a barrack box my father had. But on D-Day and through all their training, this was the helmet they wore. And of course, we Canadians wore this helmet, one like this, from right through the First World War, the Second World War, Korea, and even into the early 1960s.
As you probably know, the Cumberland Highlanders, which was represented by this Glengarry here, in 1936 was amalgamated with some of the other local units in Colchester County, such as the Machine Gun Squadron that was up in Truro, and became the North Nova Scotia Highlanders Machine Gun. And as a machine gun battalion, they weren't necessarily infantry, but they supported infantry with machine guns that were used much like we would think artillery is used in indirect fire. When the war broke out, when they started reorganizing the local regiments and, well, regiments across the country for that matter, for example, the Halifax Rifles, who you said your father first joined, became a tank regiment. The North Nova Scotia Highlanders machine gun they realized that they didn't need as many support battalions as machine guns, so they were re-rolled into infantry. So they lost the machine gun designation and the cap badge changed again, although from a distance it looks exactly the same as just what the title says. They then went over to England, became part of the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division, trained for the invasion of Northwest Europe, were part of the invasion for D-Day, fought through there, and then fought through all Northwest Europe into Germany until the armistice. Do you know what he actually did in England, like what his role was?
They were sent out, given various duties, either to guide a convoy of vehicles. They were sent out a number of times to recover German airmen who had been captured by civilians. And they seemed to have the motorbike. In a lot of cases, the pictures of my dad, it's a Harley Davidson with the stick shift on the left side and a sidecar. He seemed to be carrying either an Enfield 38 or the Smith & Wesson. That seemed to be all they'd had. But I think these German pilots were rather happy to be captured by people who are going to treat them a little better than the British civilians who'd just been bombed.
Right. So do you think that this was a role that he had in the battalion in England, or was it sort of like a secondary duty that, okay, we need 3 drivers now, and who can go out and do the job?
Knowing my father, he probably volunteered for a lot of these things.
So Earl, could you tell us something about your father, what you remember about him?
Well, I think he was not only a father, but a very good mentor. And one of the things I can remember, which was after I finished high school and I was deciding on a career, and I planned on entering one of the armed forces. I had had my pilot's license the year after high school, that summer, and I was interested in flying, so I was looking at the Navy, the venture plan, and the officer candidate program, which I did choose. And I can recall my father saying to me, "Do you know, there's something I want you to remember. If you're going to go on in command, even at the lowest level, always remember, if things go well, you thank your soldiers. If it goes badly, you are the one that has to take the responsibility." And I think all through my avocation in the military, I always thought of that. And I think it imposed a question about leadership into me very early in my adulthood, about taking responsibilities.
So Earl, thank you so much for coming in and bringing these wonderful artifacts, but more importantly, the wonderful stories about your father and his service during the war. What are the plans for the artifacts?
I think my son, who actually is an aficionado of motorbikes and that, would do well in inheriting some of this. And he'll be retiring from the United Nations probably in about 5 years and moving back to Canada. So I'll probably save it for him.
So they'll remain in the family,
Yes,
and
I
to be
think so.
enjoyed and to
Yeah.
pass the stories on to the next generation.
I think that's the best. Yeah.
Right. So thank you again so much for bringing these artifacts in and appearing on Militaria.
Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much, Gary.
My initial thoughts on the artifacts were that they were interesting for an infantry soldier, especially the motorcycle operator's helmet and that. And then, of course, that led into multiple interesting stories with Earl.